the beginning of January, our church had some days of prayer and fasting and emphasis on prayer. I'm sure most of your churches had the same. And as we were praying in one of the midday prayer meetings, we were praying for many of the departments in the church and the different ministries and leadership and the building fund. Now, our church is small, but it's growing, and we wear many hats. We're a very small staff. So not only do I serve as an associate pastor, but I really am like the church administrator. So I got to admit to you, as we were praying, I was getting overwhelmed and anxious, because where everybody was praying about the big picture, I was thinking about the details, and it was stressing me out. Has anybody ever had that experience? I'd love to see the big picture, but I'm like, well, how do we get there? What are the steps we're going to take? And the Lord is so good, because right then and there, as He has so many times when I've been, at a point like that, getting stressed, He'll speak to my heart. And we were we were counting on praying and fasting and seeking God's will. And He spoke to me. And He said, you may be seeing a lot of details and a lot of things that almost seem disjointed. He said in my heart, but they really are connected. So the only thing you need to do is follow me step by step, and then you'll see how it unfolds. And I was so touched by that, but then He went a step further, because I think I must have ADD, or I must be dense, or I'm Italian, so maybe an Italian opera, I'm like dramatic, but I get word pictures sometimes. And guess what the Lord showed me? Dot to dot. A picture in my mind, like when we were kids, how we would go in those books and we'd start to connect the dots one by one, and I was always anxious to find out what was this picture. But it was like the Lord was saying, don't worry, just take this step by step. Go from place to place I show you, and you'll see that I am working a bigger plan. And right then and there, my heart got so comforted. I felt so peaceful. And knew my only job was the next step. And I started to think about that, and as we were presented the opportunity to speak to our class, I said, I think I'm supposed to develop this further. So the name of this message is called Connecting the Dots. You really are going somewhere. So this picture on your desk is 85 dots. And it's like, what is it? What are we looking at here? It's kind of frustrating, kind of inquisitive, but I've thought about how many times my life seemed like this. It just was a bunch of dots, a bunch of little lines, and I'm thinking, God, where am I going? This all doesn't make sense to me. I think it was Raphael who spoke about the path, that sometimes we don't know where the path is leading. And I sometimes then I'm tempted to look at somebody else's dot to dot, and I can see where they're going, but I can't see me. Yeah. So I get so frustrated at times and concerned. But as I was reading in one of the commentaries in Psalm 119, 105, which has also been mentioned tonight, it's your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And as I did some research on that, the lamps in the Bible times were like a flat teapot with a little wick. They didn't really light up a big space. Yeah. And basically all the people could see was the next step.
That's good.
And it was like the Lord was saying to me, I'm going to show you the next step. Just cool it. Don't get excited. Don't get overwhelmed. But just know that I will take you step by step, and you really will make progress. And I think that sometimes we're more anxious to see a blueprint. We want to see the finished product. What is it going to look like? They're building model homes in my neighborhood, and I think that's why they put so much into the model homes, because they want to tempt you to buy them there. They want you to see what the finished product would look like. So we just saw a bunch of frames and panels and wood, and be like, you know, but when you see the model and when you see the blueprint, then you start to feel excited. But I've heard it said, and I've come to believe this in my own life, that God's will is more like a scroll than a blueprint. And it unfolds little by little. It's not like all of a sudden we'll see the blueprint. And some of us want to see it. Personally, I thank God that there was times I didn't see the path ahead, because he gives grace when the time comes, but it would be overwhelming to look at it at that point. But it's like a scroll, and God will be so faithful to us, little by little. In Psalm 37:23, it says, in the Amplified Version, the steps of a good and righteous man are directed and established by the Lord, and he delights in his way and blesses his path. It takes trust, as we've been hearing tonight, but we can follow him step by step. But let's face it, at times we just get frustrated. We just don't see where we're going, what's happening, what we're doing. All this doesn't make sense, God. Where is this all going? Do you see? Do you care? I feel like I'm going in circles. If you look at that dot to dot on your page, I mean, there's some parts that just look like they're going around and around. And how about, this is taking too long. I'm not making any progress. We then get so anxious that we start to take things into our own hands. Why all these silly steps? Why can't I get from A to, like Kelly said, to C when I go through B? Why isn't there a simpler way? But, you know, God will take us step by step. Now, could you do me a favor? The first page, don't turn over the second, but turn over the first page. This is what my life looks like when I take things in my own hands. Yeah. What a mess. 27 seemed to flow right into 32 without all the other steps. Yeah. I thought 9, 10, and 18 would be perfect. 60, 62, and 79 made a perfect path. But what a mess. Mark Battison, in his book All In, says this: most people in most churches think they are following Jesus, but I'm not so sure. They may think they are following Jesus, but the reality is this: they have invited Jesus to follow them. How many could relate to that? I went, oh! Yeah. I love this translation in Proverbs 3, 5-7 in the Message. It says, trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure out everything on your own. Listen for God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. He's the one that will keep you on track. Don't assume that you know it all. Run to God. Run from evil. That is so powerful. Don't assume that we know it all. We think we can take those shortcuts and get where we want to go, but we get severely off track. And I want to say I'm thankful for the mercy and the grace of God that when my life looked like this, off track, that we can go back to him and ask him to put us back on track. Yeah. And my husband said this years ago, I've never forgot it. He said, you know, if you really find yourself lost and you're not hearing from God anymore, you feel like, wow, you know, I just seemed that, there were times that God was speaking to me and I'm just not hearing it. I don't know what to do. And he said to go back and check, because it may be that we didn't do the last thing that God spoke to us about doing. Remember, I don't know if you'll remember, but I talked about the Belt Parkway in New York, how I hated it, but I needed to go that way to get to my destination. Yeah. Well, sometimes it's like this in our lives. You know, we need to get back on track. Yeah. My last page, I wanted to ask you what you thought, before you turn over the last page, what did you think that this dot to dot was? I'll tell you what I thought it was. I thought it was a boy playing a bugle. Like, I thought it was something musical. Did you think that, Kelly? Anybody else have an idea of what they think that might be?
Big.
Same thing? Mostly the, anybody else? Anybody else take a
I thought it
step?
was a horse and a bunny.
Okay, good. Wow. Wow, that's cool. Well, go ahead and turn it over now. Did you see that? I never saw a chef with a hat and a pie, and what really killed me was the dog in the bottom left-hand corner. Did you see the dog? I never would have dreamed that that was what it was. But see, as we follow the Lord, it says in Isaiah 55, verse 8, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways."
Yeah, that's right.
God knows. And I could have never seen that picture. And I want to just give you a personal testimony. You have to make it quick. But several years ago, I was in a Feast of Tabernacles, and I had been in one before. And I had invited a friend. I was sitting with my daughter, who was a teenager, and her friends at that time. And anyway, at that point, I never knew where my life was going. I had many opportunities to serve, many opportunities to minister, and many different things I won't mention now, but I was frustrated. And I felt like my life was going nowhere. I felt like a bunch of dots, so much experience and really not fulfilling my call. I was so frustrated, I tortured my husband. I told him that he needed to be a senior pastor. Because if he was, and he'd say to me, "Hun, I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm not. Not right now. I feel God wants me to be a team member." Anyway, in this Feast of Tabernacle, I had an experience with the Lord where he came to me and connected some dots. And he showed me that I needed to let my husband be who he made him to be. And I repented and I asked God to forgive me of that. I never realized that. But the big shock to me was then the Lord said, "Now I'm going to tell you why you think things the way you do. Because you are called to be a minister." He connected the dots. Thank you.